Hello and welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I am not your normal host. I am Dr. Susanna Alter, who will be interviewing the normal host of this podcast, Dr. Benjamin Alter. So for those of you who are new to this podcast and just happen to listen to this one for the first time, it's not normally me here. It's normally Dr. Benjamin interviewing experts in all different topics in the field of holistic medicine. But today, we will be interviewing Dr. Benjamin Alter and getting to know your host on a deeper and more intimate level. And we have such a great conversation today. I really loved what we talked about. We really dove into Dr. Benjamin's philosophy on what it means to really heal, what it means to be human, what is the purpose of being human. And we talk about how physical illness can be a portal into spiritual awakening. So our talk today, it really dives deep into the spiritual realms of healing. And we even get to hear Dr. Benjamin's own personal story, his own healing journey, and how he woke up to the truth that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, and that healing and growing and evolving is just all part of the fun of life. So we also talk about how awareness is an essential, crucial step in the healing process. And finally, at the end, when Ben just starts straight up channeling wisdom, he shares about how you can turn your life from being a battleground into a playground. And it was just such a sweet note to end on. So, definitely make sure you listen to this episode. If you are new to Dr. Benjamin, he is a naturopathic doctor licensed in the state of Colorado, where we have our private practice, Alter Health. We work one-on-one with clients locally, but also all over the world through telemedicine conferencing. So we will have one-on-one holistic lifestyle consultations with people, and we also offer group coaching weekly through our Alter Health healing community. It's a really great community for anyone who is wanting to optimize their health, but also reverse disease in a supportive community. We also offer immersive transformational weekends where we actually travel to you and teach you everything you need to know about living a sustainable, healthy, and detoxifying lifestyle in your very own home. So, enough about Alter Health. If you have been listening to this podcast and you like what you hear, make sure that you like, review, and subscribe so that you can continue hearing more wonderful wisdom. And I've been talking for so long, so without further ado, here is Dr. Benjamin Alter. Okay, are we good?
We're good.
Okay. All right, we'll see how this goes. Straight from memory. Hello, and welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of you and the planet. I'm your host today, Dr. Susanna Alter. Surprise, surprise. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing your usual host, Dr. Benjamin Alter. Hello, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
Wow, that wasn't too bad.
All right. Hey, that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So this is pretty fun. You're doing a reversal of roles here today, we've got the spotlight on you. I'll give you a quick introduction for those listeners out there who don't know who Dr. Benjamin Alter is. Dr. Benjamin Alter is a licensed naturopathic doctor in the state of Colorado, California, and Arizona. He specializes in holistic lifestyle medicine, supporting people one-on-one and also in group settings. He's also the he's the host of this wonderful podcast, interviewing experts in all sorts of topics in holistic health and wellness. And what else, Ben? Did I miss anything?
Fill in the gaps.
He's an avid mountain biker.
Yeah, I'm a human being. It's interesting to hear you introduce me in this professional way, which really, doesn't define me. I know that a lot of people do get wrapped up in their professional roles and the hats that they wear. And for whatever reason, I am not really wrapped up in that hat, the hat of doctor and the hat of podcast host and the hat of group healing facilitator and these sort of things that I just enjoy doing. It's not who I am.
Okay, well then, who are you? Who is the real Dr. Benjamin Alter?
Well, I think that's what this podcast episode is about for me. I think I want to show myself and share myself more authentically a little bit and open up because, in the 100, well, I guess, every other podcast episode is you and me talking to the audience about things that we're interested in any given week. But that being said, I feel like in the dozens of episodes that I have recorded with other people, I just kind of throw in my voice here and there. And, I don't know if it's of interest to our listeners to get to know the host a little bit better, but for those listeners who are interested, I think that's what this is about. Hopefully people can get to know me, get to understand who I really am, aside from these hats that I sometimes wear, which, like I said already, I don't really identify with any of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And well, let me just say to the listeners out there, this guy's pretty special. He's worth getting to know, but maybe I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love how you express how these titles don't define who you are as a human being, as a divine being in a human body. And so I'm curious, what kind of, how do you define yourself?
Yeah, well, I've really, as you know, been resonating. What first comes to mind when you ask that question is the work of Eckhart Tolle, and which I've really been resonating with as of late. And how I define myself changes moment to moment. And, in this moment, I'm defining myself as a human being that's opening up and sharing who I am. And not much more than that. We'll see what comes in the moments to come. But I think what I'm kind of pointing to in my vague and not really clear answer is that really my intention in this life is just to be a mindful being, and focus a little bit more on the being of who I am rather than the doing of who I am, of what I can accomplish or express or create in the world. So I think my life in the first however many, third or probably more than a quarter of my life at this point, but not quite half, somewhere in there. In the first part of my life anyway, I feel like I have been focusing on being, quite a bit and really cultivating an understanding of my essence. And from that place, my intention is always to let things manifest and reveal themselves from a pure place. And the more I feel like the more I get to know myself, the clearer the manifestations and expressions are. And it's just, so yeah, I guess my focus has been, more on the being and not so much on the doing. But that being said, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of, that's been shifting quite a bit, right? And how we've, been stepping into the role of new doctors and entrepreneurs, and there is a lot of doing in that. And I'm getting the hang of it. It doesn't come naturally. The doing doesn't come naturally. I feel like I've been trying to force things a lot because I like haven't figured out what the doing, I'm not an expert doer yet. I'm more of a beer, not a beer.
Yeah, so you're really speaking to this kind of primary purpose versus secondary purpose. For those who have listened to the work of Eckhart Tolle or read his work, so now you're it sounds like you're at this point in your life where you maybe are stepping into more of a role where there's more outward action. You have this now public, you've got thousands of eyes on you now, maybe even more. You're in the public light. And how does that feel?
It's funny that you say that. I don't think about that. And I don't know if that's accurate. But in any case, I think that I think I have thought about it. And whenever I think about, who's listening to this podcast, who's watching these videos, who's listening and who's resonating with this, I think there is certainly a voice of insecurity and wanting to please the audience. And I think that's a natural tendency for anyone who is a creator, an artist, probably goes through some degree of the same thing of what do people want to see and hear and feel and experience? How can I serve humanity in that way? And we know that the most important thing is to serve the authentic, inspirational force that is moving through us in any given moment. And if we're out of alignment with that, our creation is just simply not going to be have that oomph that we can feel and resonate with and appreciate. So I think that I've been balancing the outer voice of critique and perfectionism and catering to what people want to hear and see and feel and experience with the inner authentic inspiration. And hopefully the meeting of those two forces and expressions is a good one. And I think time will tell. Time is telling. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so it really sounds like throughout your life you've been really tuning in with just kind of allowing yourself to flow with that natural divine inspiration.
Well, I don't know about that. I think you're the master flower. I think that I don't think it comes naturally, the flowing.
Okay, but you've been being. And
been being, yeah.
Been being. I guess for some reason when I heard you talk about being, I also thought about just flowing with the inspiration, with divine inspiration. But now I think I hear what you're saying is this: you're doing more learning, more kind of gaining skills, more just like receiving more. And now you've transitioned into this part of your life where you're putting out more. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've done enough learning in the first third or whatever of my life to satisfy a few lifetimes.
Well,
I've
yeah.
just been, it's funny because I think that I always say that I don't have any sort of seeker inside of me. Like I'm not a seeker. I don't feel like I'm a seeker, but I think I am a seeker in the way that I aggregate and cultivate knowledge and experience. I think I'm always after more experience. And I don't think, I think a lot of seekers are trying to seek the answers to things. And I don't think that that's what I'm seeking, but I am seeking experience. And yeah, I guess, aren't we all? I don't know.
All right. Well, So,
What are we talking about in this
what are
episode?
we talking about? I mean, I guess, you've gotten pretty deep into your internal world pretty fast into this conversation, and I'm curious
Yeah.
what message you would have for the listeners out there. Like,
Yeah,
what?
let's focus on the tangible, not the depth. Sorry to interrupt your question.
Oh, yeah, I'm just curious, like, in your experience with, allowing wisdom to kind of guide you through being but also through doing, what kind of message do you have for the listeners? It's something that may be helpful to weave into their life when they're considering maybe purpose or what they want to do with their lives.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because I love talking about purpose and how it relates to health. And, we do that sometimes, and I think that it's hard to be healthy without a connection with purpose. And, I like to point people back towards the primary purpose, because if we can really master our primary purpose, then the secondary purpose is simply a natural byproduct that comes from the primary purpose. And once again, I'm talking about just cultivating an awareness of the authentic self. And that is, it's like, I think a lot of us are living in this, physical reality where there's all sorts of things going on. There's all sorts of podcasts that we could listen to or create. There's all sorts of information that we can indulge ourselves in. There's all sorts of business ideas that we could, bring into the world. And we are overwhelmed with not only information, but also possibilities. So I think that a lot of us are maybe in this state of overwhelm, and I think the term is decision fatigue, where it's like there's so many options that it's, we rest in analysis paralysis and don't know where to go and what step to take. And I think that's okay. And then, a lot of us are in a state of analysis paralysis, and then also in a state of self-judgment. Oh, I should be doing this. Oh, I should be doing that. That person's doing that, and that's really cool, so I want to do that, but I want to be better, or I want to go faster or grow bigger. And I am guilty for having these same fleeting thoughts in my life, for sure. I'm not saying that we need to, avoid all of that at all costs. But I think my point is focusing on the constant presence and the constant force that we are and that is moving through us, and rather than being too influenced by outside forces that are always changing and always shifting. So once again, kind of deep, but I guess your question was like, how would, or what recommendations might I have for people when it comes to connecting with their purpose? Is that kind of it?
Yeah, well, I guess what's coming to mind is, have you always had this kind of perspective and outlook on life?
Well, no.
Well, so I'm kind of curious. It might be interesting to go back a little bit in time and talk about your journey with, coming to a place where there is more peace and acceptance in just, simply being in the world.
The perpetual journey that I'm really in the thick of. That's what you're talking about? Yeah, well, just to answer, just to complete the thought that I was having before, the primary purpose, if we can focus on that, which I think, to put clearly and simply, is, self-realization. And the perpetual path of self-realization is not some sort of objective or event. It's a process that we're living into. And if we maintain kind of that focal point in terms of our compass and our direction of just realizing ourselves, connecting with ourselves, and allowing ourselves to express naturally and gracefully into this world, then the what and the specifics and the details and the all of those kind of physical world logistical things, they take care of themselves. So anyway, yeah.
Well, that's profound.
It is. And I'm, I'm really good at telling myself things that I need to hear. And that's a lot of the times the things that come out of my mouth.
You mean you're not enlightened, Ben?
Things that come out of my mouth are really intended for me more than anyone else. So I should really be the one listening to this podcast after we finish recording it. Yeah.
But also valuable for all the listeners out there as well. And yes.
So this, the story, when did this all, I feel like, I'm talking about this authentically motivated, driven direction in life. And no, of course I wasn't, I think to some degree we're all born with that imprinted and ingrained in us, but we've got to chisel away some egoic artifacts to get to the precious truth that is sometimes layers and layers deep within ourselves.
Right. Yeah, and just, to create a little context, the very first episode that Ben recorded is episode 0, and he shares a little bit about his healing story, but I feel like it was more based off of a physical accident, and then how that kind of opened you up to the holistic nature of human beings and health and everything. Mm-hmm. But now I feel like there's this additional chapter of your healing story that maybe we didn't talk about in that episode, and that's more about, this, I think it's very much related to how you have evolved showing up in the world as a holistic lifestyle doctor. And all of the internal, mental, and emotional factors that play into that. And I don't know, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I don't really recall too specifically and clearly all of the details around that episode number 0 and what I shared. I do remember that I shared the happenings around my mountain bike accident my senior year of college, at which point in time I was very much on the course of going into conventional medical school, and really just had a narrow-minded vision of what I wanted to do with my life from the point of time when I was, I think, in 7th or 8th grade, when I broke my wrist the first time, and I saw an orthopedic surgeon, and he adjusted me and reduced me, put me in a cast, and things healed up. I was just fascinated by the mechanics of the physical body, and I just, from that point forward, throughout high school and college, it was just pre-med, medical school, orthopedic surgery, I just wanted to fix people mechanically. And then, senior year of college, flew over the handlebars, broke my right wrist, and just that was like a spark that started this perpetual, inner exploration journey, where I was absolutely not intending to go at any point in my life. I was kind of, it was divine intervention, universe kind of throwing down a roadblock and saying, hey, slow down, literally slow down, reconsider what the heck you're doing. This is your life. This is your one life, this physical life, your one physical life as Benjamin. What are you doing? And that pause, a lot of things happened. And, here I am 10 years later.
Yeah. And so when I had met you about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, you had just finished your master's in spiritual psychology. You were meditating every day. You were this very open, compassionate man, very interested in spirituality, very interested in the mind-body connection. And that's, really what we bonded over in the beginning. And I'd say since then, you've just deepened even more so into, I would say, awareness of this crazy thing we call the human life, and all the, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual factors.
Yeah, well,
So I want you to talk about that.
It's funny that you from your perspective, talking about me deepening into that, because I feel it doesn't always feel that way. It feels like we are going backwards a lot of the time, until we think something happens again when we can reevaluate what's going on, and it's like, okay, actually, things are going forwards.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when we met, and yeah, I was very spiritually focused. I mean, I had, spent, 4 or 5 years of my life just looking at nothing other than the spiritual aspects of myself and cultivating that connection and that awareness. And in the midst of doing so, also, going through a lot of, emotional healing stuff, healing of past traumas and all sorts of process stuff. And then I kind of stopped doing that. I took my focus away from the spiritual cultivation or whatever, and I just was, focusing more on physical world reality and living my life with, still maintaining a meditation practice, still kind of, to some degree, very much aware of my spiritual nature, but I wasn't 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with that on my single point of focus in my life. So because I shifted my focus to the physical world reality, I sometimes had the feeling like I was disconnecting from my spiritual nature, which I know conceptually that that's impossible to do. It's just the awareness of our spiritual nature that we might have a connection or a less than optimal connection with in any given moment. So yeah, anyways, when we met, I was, from my perspective, kind of drifting away from my spiritual focus. But the way that I see it now is, it's like once we have these experiences and these learnings and these elevations of consciousness, for lack of a better term, we things don't regress. We don't go backwards. Put another way, like once we have true healing, true growth, we don't unheal or shrink. That is here to stay. So all of those experiences are very much here to stay, even though I feel like they, took a back seat for some point of, a good portion of the last 5 or 6 years or whatever. So.
Well, then, so in, recent times, last few months, where would you say you're at with all of this? Because, from my perspective, it sure looks like you're continuing to have insights.
Yeah, well, at some point in this conversation, I do want to talk about meditation.
Okay.
And stopping meditation.
Let's do that now, because that was part of the journey.
Yeah, I would say I really stopped meditating like a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago, let's say. And then the year before then, I was kind of, it was fading away. The practice was fading away. And I don't know why I want to talk about this, but I think it's important. I think it's important because I think in our world today, a lot of people grasp the physical practices as a means of spiritual cultivation. And spiritual cultivation, I know now, doesn't happen through physical practices. It happens through spiritual practices, which don't have any look or feel, or there's no one way of doing a spiritual practice. Life is a spiritual practice. The way that we show up in any given moment is a spiritual practice, and that's the real spiritual exercise and meditation for, self-awareness purposes. It has nothing to do with being quiet and shutting up and, focusing on thoughts or focusing on experience or feelings in the body, all of which it would be interesting to count the number of days that I spent in my life sitting down and doing absolutely nothing except for that.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, I think that in that process of quitting meditating, it was difficult because I think what made it difficult is the judgments I had on myself around that. in the last couple of years, listeners know meditation has become like such a thing. And here I was like just feeling called to stop meditating. And it was like, is there something wrong with me? I felt like I was forcing myself into this. And yeah.
But it sounds like in the action of stopping meditation, you were able to really deeply understand how, a person isn't more spiritual because they're meditating. That spiritual nature is with a person every single moment of every single day, no matter what they're doing, no matter how they're living. And I think, that's a beautiful insight to have. And I mean, I think, to be devil's advocate, it's like one of the questions that comes up is, oh, well, do you think that you would have this awareness, this level of consciousness if it wasn't for...
If I didn't spend 6 years meditating?
Exactly.
Or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. I guess probably not. I don't know. Like, because I didn't. Because I did spend 6 years meditating. But yeah, so my message is not, hey, all you meditators out there, stop meditating. My message is be clear on what your intention is when you're in any moment. Mm-hmm. I think that meditation, I like to say that meditation is powerful for training the nervous system to relax, because a lot of people live their life without really knowing what it feels like to relax. And for those kind of people, a relaxation process or exercise for the physical body can be really supportive and nourishing. Mm-hmm. My body, at this point at least, for the most part, most days, knows how to relax, mm-hmm. except for those muscles in my back in the last week or so that are aggravated because of a mountain bike wipeout.
Right.
But anyways.
But yeah, so I think, what points out to me in your story is that 6 or 7 years ago, whenever it was when you started meditating, there was a true, authentic inspiration, and you were intrigued. You were excited probably to sit down and cultivate this practice, would you say?
Well, I didn't really see it as, I'm going to start this lifelong practice. But yeah, I will go back in time and share the insight and inspiration to meditate. I was living and working abroad in Hungary, and I was experiencing a lot of physical symptoms that I thought were because of something I was eating or drinking, even though I was eating a really pure diet, drinking pure water. I was traveling and, kind of partying. I thought that I was just kind of like catching bugs, something physical. And then I had an insight that there's actually nothing physically wrong with me. I don't feel well emotionally. I feel lonely. I feel homesick. I feel out of place, out of touch, out of alignment with my life. What the heck am I doing? This was after my mountain bike crash. So this is, at the point in time where I had an increased level of sensitivity with my authenticity. So I was feeling the consequences of being out of alignment. And so I knew what meditation was. I knew what it looked like. I knew how to do it, even though I had never really done it. It was, something that wasn't foreign to me, and I just kind of sat myself down and just started kind of practicing, I guess, maybe affirmations, just reassuring myself that everything is okay, just focusing on my breath and my, inner peace, and affirming that to myself, and my physical symptoms, evaporated, dissolved. Mm-hmm. It was no more in that moment. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, they trickled away over the next week or two. It was like, boom, done.
Wow.
So I think that to some degree I was like hooked on meditation because I recognized the power in that moment. And I think that there was part of me that wanted to just stay attached to it. And like I said already, spiritual awareness and cultivation doesn't come through physical exercises and practices. It comes through spiritual practices. So for quite a while, I think that my meditation was a physical practice, and meditation, can be a spiritual practice, absolutely. But there's a lot of other ways to perform spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, So kind of to go back to, what I really see in your story is that wisdom spoke to you by saying, hey, Ben, sit down, meditate, see the power of the mind. It served you in that moment. And it seems like we're just taking whatever steps made most sense to you in the moment. And that's kind of how wisdom speaks to us. Yeah. And then you also several years later realized, okay, maybe at this point, it's not serving me the same way it used to, and you were courageous to let it go.
Just like an old pair of pants, we outgrow things, and, it's time to get a new pair of pants. And I think that a lot of people try to hem their pants and put patches and change things to fit their new self, but sometimes we just have to let things go and step into something new. And I guess that's kind of what has been happening.
Yeah. But something you said is really interesting. You're talking about the difference between a physical practice and a spiritual practice. And in your story, it seems to me as though the spiritual practice was really listening to your wisdom and following that guidance to the meditation cushion, and then also away from the meditation cushion. And in between, maybe there was a little bit of forcing, a little bit of, okay, Ben, you need to sit down and meditate physically every day for however long. And so can you talk about just, I guess, the real difference between what you call a physical practice and a spiritual practice? Because I think the line is very, subtle for a lot of people.
Well, of course, thank you for bringing up the wisdom guidance. That's the terminology that we know now and can use now. And certainly we can look back and recognize how wisdom always guides without exception. And it feels good to trust that. And that's not to say that it's easy all the time to trust that wisdom is guiding us in the present moment through your challenges, but it is. So, the meditation as a physical or spiritual practice, yes, it's a fine line, and it really it's that moment to moment intention. I'll give you an example, a little story about when I experienced meditation as a physical practice. Silly me. I was in yoga teacher training, and it was an immersion, like a 30-day, every day, 8 or 10 hours a day kind of thing. And there was, morning practice and meditation, and you've done it. And I was, at that point in time, I was so connected and attached to my meditation practice that instead of waking up at 5:30 to get to yoga at 6, I woke up at 4:30 to meditate every single day of yoga teacher training before meditation and yoga. And I realized in the midst of that it was not something that I wanted to do, that I felt authentically inspired to do. I felt it was almost like an addict kind of just acting out of habituation. And it was really difficult to let that go. And the funny thing is I continued to do that even though I recognized, hey, this is like, I don't know if this is really serving me. I should be sleeping maybe at that hour. I recognized that my ego was driving that decision-making process, and I still did it. And at that point in time, I was really also wrapped up in this whole idea of discipline and commitment and honoring myself and not allowing room for moment-to-moment inspiration and guidance and wisdom. And that really hasn't come until the last, 6 months or so. But yeah, so there's
that's a great example.
Yeah, and I think that we are, it's not like I still do things in my life, as you well know, that are ego forced, ego driven.
Well, that's okay. You're human, Ben.
Yeah, and I guess my message in sharing the story is not to criticize myself or to criticize anyone from perpetuating some egoic habituated pattern, or it's just to bring a level of awareness that I kind of had in that moment, like I shared, but
you overrode it.
But I overrode it, and that's okay too. But
Yeah.
it's just having that, it's not being completely on autopilot in our life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how in that story you described how internally, when you're forcing yourself to wake up and meditate for that additional hour, internally it sounds like from how I heard you describe it that it didn't feel good. Like internally there was some
funny,
kind of
because
friction.
Because
tension.
it does, just like any addict, it does feel good to the ego. It's like, yeah, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm such a disciplined meditator. Yeah. Like I should wear a gold star and a badge to show the world that I know how to do this. That, and obviously that's a very exaggerated ego voice, but I think the point is that
you didn't feel authentically inspired, were
right.
the words that you used, but you were still doing it.
Yeah, and I think that, and once again, that's okay. We can do things without feeling authentically inspired. I think the power, however, lies in that awareness of where our action is coming from and aligning our authentic inspiration with our physical world action is where the magic happens. Mm-hmm. And obviously we're not going to be living that and doing that 100% of our life, but I think if that, once again, is kind of the focal point and the intention and the true north on the compass needle, then we're probably on a good path.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love how you point out how awareness is really kind of the first step mm-hmm. to kind of getting mm-hmm. back on track.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything more about that, or?
I don't know. I feel like we're maybe at a good point to pivot into whatever else. Okay,
great. So my kind of next question is, how is this all folding into your secondary purpose of, being a doctor, creating this online healing community, your podcast, everything like that? And, really, what do you see now where you are with this awareness? What would you say your purpose is, your goal is, your dreams are?
Whoa, this is a great exercise. We should record podcasts more so I can just deeply reflect. But, as I do say sometimes in the podcast, I feel like really my mission and my purpose and just what really fires me up is to show people how powerful they are in their self-healing capabilities, capacities, both, of course, physically, and how the body heals itself. That we aren't recognizing and actualizing enough in our world today, the self-healing capacity of the body, just because of the limitations of conventional medical system and whatnot. But also, that's obviously conveyed through what I say in the podcast and how I introduce the podcast and everything. But I think something that maybe I don't convey and articulate enough is really how that also holds true when we're talking about mental health and emotional health and spiritual health. We are course correcting all the time on the path of self-realization and authentic, holistic health in any given moment. And I think that when we can leverage that awareness and leverage an understanding of how the mind works, and I just think it's just the most empowering place to live. And I feel like, when I look out in the world and watch the news and see people struggling, and I just want to show people the power that they have to shift their lives, holistically. Mm-hmm. And of course, that includes their physical health and how they feel. And I think it's really hard to, live the fullest life without feeling physically well. So yes, I think that physical wellness energy, sleep, nutrition, all the things are paramount and central. But I think that that's just the starting point.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, I know you, Ben, and I know that we've had multiple conversations about how, this kind of role that you've taken on as being a naturopathic doctor is really, it's like, yes, you support people in feeling physically better, but really the bigger thing under that is like what you're saying in the very beginning of this podcast. The purpose of all people, of all human beings, is to wake up to realizing who they truly are. Yeah. And it's like, that's what is the kind of
it's like slowly, it's like that is coming more slowly but surely coming into fruition, that aspect of practice.
Right.
And it's funny because I'm just recalling a conversation I was having before I started naturopathic medical school, because I was in this point of, should I persevere in conventional? Should I go to naturopathic? Should I even go to medical school at all? Because I had this vision of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to support people in their health holistically. And, and that vision was spiritually focused, holistically focused, and certainly the physical health was a key part of that. And I was, before medical school, studying in this nutrition program and everything. So I was very much physically oriented. And I remember having a conversation before deciding to go on into naturopathic medical school, talking about how, yes, I am going to be studying physical health and pathology and how the body works, but I really do recognize that as just kind of the entry point, the point at which I can meet people, because every body has a physical body. So whenever I consult with anyone online or in person, we meet physical form to physical form. There's no way around that. Mm-hmm. But it is kind of a portal or an entry point to more, so that's, I think my most genuine passion is using physical health as a portal into spiritual cultivation and awakening, and enhanced mental and emotional health, and just overall wellness.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's so true. Some people aren't even willing or able to consider the spiritual nature of human bodies until they go through a health crisis of their own.
Yeah, and I remember also having a conversation with someone about, wouldn't it be so cool if we could practice preventative spiritual medicine just like we can practice preventative physical medicine, and get our spiritual colonoscopy like equivalent, and just kind of do, and what I mean by that is like just kind of do the spiritual work, even though we don't like using the term work, but focus on the spiritual awareness and spiritual connection as a means of prevention, not as a crisis. Mm-hmm. Once crisis hits, we are forced into that. But I guess when it comes down to it, it happens the way it happens, and there's no, it's not like we can publish an online course of spiritual cultivation. Mm-hmm. It's that is not something that can be shown or taught. We're all in it ourselves, yet at the same time together.
Yeah. Well, and then I think, those workshops that do focus on spiritual cultivation then go into all those physical practices like you were talking about earlier.
Like meditation.
Like meditation and journaling and visualizations and...
That's a good point. This physical... Because we're in a physical world, when we're talking about spiritual stuff, it takes on a physical flavor. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of no way around that except for pointing the pointer. Our words, Eckhart talks about words as being pointers, like recognizing the limitation of the physical form and pointing into the spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think even so, there are a lot of great courses out there that teach these wonderful practices, but there's, unless a person is open to it, like, I mean, I know for me, because I'm one of those people who wasn't, open to this idea of my spirituality until I had my physical illnesses.
Me neither, until I flew over my handlebars.
Yeah, and if you mentioned meditation, I was just like, whatever, I'm focused on climbing rocks, and so yeah, it's true. I think it goes back to what you're saying. It happens, like waking up happens the way it's gonna happen, and well, yeah, if we think about spiritual preventative medicine, it
it was kind of like a joke, because I know that we can't really do that, but it's like, wouldn't it be cool if we could?
Yeah.
To avoid the spiritual crises that a lot of us are faced with. But those are the
blessings.
Those are the blessings, and as long as we can maintain a glimmer of that awareness, it's like when we're in the thick of it, it's like, of course, it's not a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we can have a glimmer of just like the smallest fragment, like one photon of light, one photon of awareness, just like one. And that's kind of all we need to shift things. And, that's all it takes to pull us out of the crisis and into the opportunity. And the amazing thing is that one photon of awareness or light or whatever is always present,
Mm-hmm.
It always is, even when it isn't.
Mm-hmm. So true.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I feel like to pivot once again, I want to kind of rein us back in and say, okay, wow, Ben, you've really showed us your deeply spiritual side.
Have I done a good job of revealing who I really am?
Because let's be honest, a lot of times, you get in front of a camera and you're talking about nutrition and drinking good water and breathing good air and, nutrition, which I've heard you say is, your other passion. So how do you kind of, balance these two? On one end, you're so passionate about how people take care of their physical bodies. And on the other end, it's like, this body is impermanent. We're all spiritual beings and blah, 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 blah.
I know. And there's a lot of, as we were talking about last night, there's a lot of very spiritually oriented people who are neglecting their physical bodies. And it pains me. It does. And there's a lot of really, ripped, cut, jacked, strong, plant-based, doing all the things. And I guess I don't know them on a spiritual, intimate level, but, I'm sure I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm sure there's a lot of really physically, optimally healthy people who might feel detached spiritually. So yeah. What was your question?
I'm kind of curious about how you tie in these kind of seemingly separate kind of perspectives. On one end, it's like really caring so much about the physical body, and then on the other end, when we go into the spiritual realm deeper and deeper, we see how little importance this physical world reality really holds.
Yeah, well, I don't really believe that. I believe that
tell me more.
Yeah, my philosophy, I guess, is what I would say is that our physical world is the place that we have the opportunities for spiritual cultivation. So it's like, I love having conversations with people about how spiritual awareness and shifts and conscious leaps take place when things shift physically. It's like, it's not that there's the spiritual and then there's the physical. It's not like there's these two separate realities. There are dual coexisting realities. I think we conceptually understand that. I know I conceptually understand that. And so it's not like an either or. Mm-hmm. It's like, are we faced with a physical problem right now? Let's address it physically. Are we faced with a spiritual problem right now? Let's consider how we can nurture that spiritually. And obviously for any individual, there has to be a level of at least openness and curiosity to learn new things, see new things. That goes for sure with regard to nutrition and lifestyle physically, and it also goes when we're talking about mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. We need to have an openness, at least, to consider things differently than we have.
Mm-hmm.
And that openness is, we don't always have that. I know I am closed-minded. I have a lot of, I'm closed-minded with regard to a lot of things. I think I recognize those blind spots and that lack of openness at points in my life, and I think it's important to, just have a level of awareness around our perspective and vision in any moment. And I think that's where the help of practitioners and partners and teachers and children and parents and relationships of all sort come in, because they help point out our blind spots and help us increase our level of awareness and understanding around our perspective, physically and spiritually.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, so kind of to go back to my question, you don't subscribe to that way of thinking that, the more spiritual one becomes, the more they neglect the physical nature of life. What I hear you say is that, this physical world reality is our temporary home right now. It's crucial for our spiritual growth and evolution too. So we can't neglect our physical body. We can't neglect our physical world. We need to take care of it. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Of course. Like that's it's a physical practice, but it doesn't have to be an only physical practice. Just like meditation can be a physical practice, but it doesn't have to be a physical practice. Nutrition seems like a physical practice, but it can be a spiritual practice. Like, absolutely. And the same goes for everything, right?
So describe to the listeners what it looks like for nutrition to be a spiritual practice.
Well, I think that, that looks differently for every unique spiritual being.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, my personal relationship with it is, nutrition isn't a spiritual practice. Exercise isn't a spiritual practice. Life is, the spiritual practice. And at least that's kind of my conceptual languaging around it, is like, there's no one part of life that is. And when people talk about, oh, that person's really spiritual or that person's not really spiritual, that's one of my pet peeves, because we are all the same. I think we all at least conceptually understand that human beings are one. When we look at things from a biomedical scientific perspective, we're 99.9999% genetically identical. We're kind of all one, pretty much, And so why was I saying that? With regard to our, spiritual nature, we're also all the same. We're all made of the same stuff. That person, that spiritual teacher, that guru, same stuff that you and I are made out of. And that's not to say that they don't have interesting, unique insights and perspectives to share and interesting language to share it from or point with. But the point is, the constant presence, the orchestrating, unifying force of the universe is very much the same, alive, vital, present, thriving in each and every one of us. So with regard to how we channel that in any moment and how we, live our lives spiritually, it's just like a unique flavor. And that's the amazing thing about the human experience, is that we are this, rainbow of humanity is such, it's like the full spectrum rainbow. and there's infinite ways that spirituality expresses. So with regard to living a spiritual life and having a spiritual focus, there are that many number of ways that it looks and feels, and
Yeah, it sounds like really what the essence of living a spiritual life, we can call it, nutrition can be a spiritual practice, sitting on this couch could be a spiritual practice. It really comes down to the very first thing you said in this podcast, being present from moment to moment.
Yeah, and I think we've all had those experiences where we're just really present in whatever it is. Maybe it's watching a movie, maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's eating a chocolate bar. We can have these spiritual experiences, for lack of a better term, even though life is a spiritual experience, but we can have the awareness of the spiritual experience. And it's not in the chocolate bar or the conversation or the movie. It's the potential that lies in every moment. And so yeah. I think I didn't really anticipate talking so much spirituality in this conversation, but one of my messages and that I try to convey is normalizing and demystifying all of the things that we are confused about. Spirituality certainly being one of them. Nutrition, normalizing, demystifying healthy eating, like making healthy eating normal. I would love, you and I know how much I would love if every restaurant were serving real food. And I would love if every human being that were walking around with their head in the clouds and, disembodied would recognize their spiritual nature. And I know that they're on their own journey, and they probably do recognize their spiritual nature a lot of the time, and sometimes I'm driving next to them when they're not, and it's my spiritual opportunity to embrace that.
Yeah. So what time is it?
How long have we been going? An hour.
An hour?
Yeah.
Do you want to keep going?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how do you want to I need
to wrap this up. That's my responsibility as the host.
I'm not going to help you on this one. I'm disembodied.
Well, I mean, I think maybe I have one more question and then we'll rein it in.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about with, all the different ways that living a spiritual life can manifest in this physical world reality. And, also because you are such a nutrition geek, and if any of you listeners out there have listened to any of our nutrition videos, you know that we come across as being kind of opinionated.
Yeah.
Especially Dr. Ben here. So I'm kind of curious, Ben, if living a spiritual life can have all these different flavors, all these different manifestations of how people choose to nourish their bodies, then how does that fit in with this idea that there is one right way of eating?
I have felt that one coming from a mile away. So here's my answer. It has to do with, we've kind of pointed to the fact that there's spiritual reality, and physical world reality. And in the physical world reality, there are natural laws. Gravity, being one of them. The biochemistry in a human being one of them. All these physical laws that kind of dictate our experiences physically in the world. So, when I talk about nutrition and lifestyle from my opinionated perspective, which I recognize as being, that's maybe where I do have some blind spots, is in that how I convey my ideas around nutrition. But they're more than ideas. They're scientifically aligned with the laws of nature. So that's, as far as I know. When people present alternative ideas, I measure them up and see them through kind of a scientific lens in terms of how nature works and these laws that dictate our physical world reality. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, I simply, my mission once again is to point out the physical laws that dictate and govern how the physical body works, how our physical world functions, and hopefully with that information empower people to live aligned and in accordance with those physical laws, while also recognizing that, hey, there's going to be people who disregard their bodies, disregard the planet, disregard animals, disregard the fact that gravity exists, disregard these basic physical laws. There's going to be people that, don't care, for lack of a better term, or act as if they don't care. And yeah, that's something that I think in this world, in this life, my opportunity is embracing fully and loving fully, even though, like, all of those people, for all of their actions, all of their decisions, even though they're not aligned with me and they're not aligned with the laws of nature. But I think my opinionated perspective comes from how the world works. And once again, the mission, the intention is really just to empower people and give them an informed decision on how they can live their best, healthiest life based on these natural laws. And the rest is up to them. As we well know, we're not going to be able to hold people's hands and feed people and cook food for people and blend a smoothie for people and make juice for people. And we can't do that. We can't do the force feeding, but we can provide, I know it's biased, but unbiased information, just like that. Just information that is in alignment with how nature works. Mm-hmm. And when I see the carnivore thing, when I see the paleo thing, when I see the alternative side of the other side of the picture, the other side of the coin, I do a lot of digging and diving to open my eyes and see how this functions based on the natural laws. And I simply have not yet seen anything that that works, like a whole food plant-based diet. That's the natural diet. I mean, yeah.
All right, there you have it.
Obviously this could catapult us into another hour at least.
It's true. But I'm glad we touched on that. And what kind of last words do you have for the listeners?
It's that open-ended. I'm usually not that open-ended with my guests, but sometimes I am.
Okay, I'll
you can
make
just
it more
blabber
specific.
a little bit while I collect these last words. But
okay, I'll blabber a little bit.
Or maybe rein me in and focus me in terms of more specifics on what you want to draw forth.
Well, what words of wisdom, that you've gained from your spiritual journey thus far on this planet Earth in this lifetime? What wise words do you have for people who are, interested, curious about, I guess, opening up more in a spiritual way? What words do you have for them?
Yeah. Can I change your question just a little bit?
Yeah.
Because the spiritual thing, I think that, that's, certainly important as we've discussed, but we're already spiritual. Like there, you can't open up, you can't do more of what you already are.
Well, that was part of what I wanted you to say. Yeah. So thank you. And then go on.
So, really what I hear you asking, or what I want to answer is, how can people live a more authentically, genuinely healthy life?
Yeah, answer that question.
And it starts with spiritual awareness, the awareness that whether you like it or not, you are a divine spiritual being. And this human experience is nothing more than just a human experience. It's your playground or your battlefield. You choose a playground or battlefield. Sometimes it feels like a battlefield, but I try and remember that it's a playground. And on this playground or battlefield, there are opportunities to play or to fight battles and to win and to learn and to grow and to heal and to love. And I like remembering that learning, growing, healing, loving, those 4 words are pretty much synonyms spiritually. So whenever we're faced with a challenge that we can learn, an obstacle that we can grow through, a wound that we can heal physically, or a disease that we can heal physically, or a person or situation that we can love, that is the ultimate opportunity. That is the spiritual, for lack of a better term, opportunity. The ultimate opportunity is to move into that awareness, at least open up to that and move forward. And sometimes it's going to look like shifting what's at the end of your fork and what's on your plate. Sometimes it's going to look like shifting the environment that you're living and breathing and the people you're around. And sometimes it's going to look like shifting your thoughts around those environment and amidst that environment, whether it's in your home or your work or your creative side of things. Sometimes it's going to look like forgiveness in relationship, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of self, letting go of judgments. All of these things that are very much different are very much the same. And the way that they are the same is that they bring enhanced health holistically. They bring enhanced energy, they bring enhanced mood, they bring enhanced blood flow, they bring balanced hormones, they bring all of the things that provide us the baseline foundation to have a healthy experience. So my takeaway message is to live life with those glasses on, the glasses through which we can see the ultimate opportunities of learning, growing, healing, and loving. And I think that if that's the way that we see life, then we're dragged through the healing and growing and learning and loving it, or we embrace it and enjoy it. It's inevitable.
And life is a playground.
And then, maybe we get out of the battlefield and maybe we embrace the playground that it is. And that's where I'm at is, remembering that it is a playground and I don't have to beat myself up because on this battlefield that we can create, we are the only person that's shooting ourselves in the foot.
Whoa. Well, that's good. That's good. Learning, growing, loving, healing. Remember those 4 things. Remember how you too have the power to turn your personal battlefield into a playground.
Yeah.
Those are words of wisdom from yours truly.
Yeah, and once again, I think I said this about 40 minutes ago or whatever, but these are the words that I need to hear. So I'm going to listen to this one to the end, and it's a perpetual process of remembering these things. It's not like, okay, listen, check, done, and done. It's a practice, and the practice is being present in the moment. So that's kind of my other kind of reminder for myself, for listeners out there. Do the thing.
All right. Next time you're in a mood, I'm going to play this podcast episode.
Please do. Please do.
Well, thanks so much for your authenticity, vulnerability, and just really speaking from your heart. I can really feel it. I can feel the good vibes, the good loving energy. Can you feel it through your phone, through your audio system, through your earbuds,
on
whatever
YouTube.
It is, on YouTube? Well, thanks so much for sitting down with me.
Yeah.
And, okay, I'm going to try to do what you do at the end of the podcast. Peace and love till next time.
Is that, I guess I do
Or maybe
that.
you say, till next time, peace and love, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Peace, love, and until next time. All right, now you do it.
Peace, love, and until next time.